Okay.
Dive right in. Perfect. Well, hello everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. We're focusing on mobile analytics, in-app marketing, and we have some experts here from Localytics to talk about it. So I have Yvonne Chen, who is the Senior Director of Product Marketing and Strategy at Localytics, and Annalisa Bowens, who's the Growth Account Manager. So we'll just get started with Yvonne. How about you talk a little bit about what you do at Localytics, what Localytics does, and then Annalisa, you can chime in as well.
Sure, that sounds great. So thanks for joining us today. We're really excited to be here. So I've been at Localytics for about a year and a half, and I head up our product marketing and strategy team. Our team's basically just focused on making sure that the end-to-end experience from product development to launch and communication is done pretty seamlessly out to the market. For Localytics, for those of you guys that aren't familiar with what Localytics does, Localytics is a mobile app marketing and analytics software company based in Boston with offices in San Francisco and London. So Annalisa and I are actually joining from San Francisco. Localytics was actually founded in about 2009 as an analytics-only company, and over the last couple of years, Localytics has grown into additional other areas, in particular marketing services such as push and in-app messaging, email marketing, just marketing automation in general. So the goal of Localytics today is a lifecycle engagement platform where no matter where you are in the lifecycle, we aim to give you the tools and capabilities to achieve what you need to do on mobile. So that is Localytics. Annalisa, do you want to give a quick intro?
Sure thing. So I'm Annalisa. I work here in San Francisco, primarily with our startup customers and developers just getting started, helping them figure out, what to track, what's important, how do you get those first engagement campaigns set up. I work a lot on writing, hopefully very straightforward documentation so that you guys can help yourselves to some of our software tools. Currently working on some FAQs for our site, which should be launching this week, and some trainings for push messaging, which will be coming out here shortly as well.
Perfect.
Awesome.
Well, Yvonne, you have a presentation for the audience, so maybe I'll let you start with that. And then just for everyone watching, feel free to drop questions using the Q&A feature of Google Hangouts. If you're not familiar with that, look for the little quotation box with Q&A on it. Or if it's easier, just drop the questions on the event page, and I'll be sure to get them answered for you as well. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to you, Yvonne. Thanks.
Awesome. So I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully everyone will be able to see. I'm going to go through the, let's see. Okay, can everyone see my screen? Or Connor, if you can let me know if you can see my screen.
Yep, you're perfect.
Okay, great. So today, sort of just want to talk to you guys a little bit about general, mobile kind of 101 marketing. It's going to be a little bit more marketing focused just because that's what we sort of see as sort of the hot topics these days, and feel that it's also useful to talk a little bit more about mobile marketing because analytics, I feel like, is something that a lot of you may already understand the importance of, but marketing is also a piece that you can actually use to take advantage of building out your mobile app. So one thing I will caveat is that Localytics is a mobile app first company. So the content of the presentation is mostly geared towards mobile and mobile apps. So if you don't have that as your primary startup venture, then the content may not be as relevant for you, but still, feel free to join and ask a lot of questions, and we will go through today basically the opportunity that we see in terms of why we believe apps are unique and provide a different type of landscape for personalizing an experience for users, which then brings us into how we sort of think about the world, which is around the app lifecycle. So we talk a lot about different ways that you can actually personalize the app lifecycle. We'll go through a couple of examples, do's and don'ts. And then lastly, we're going to conclude with Predictive App Marketing, which is a recent development that we've actually been working on for the last couple of months, and it's sort of where we see the future of app marketing going. And so we will talk to you guys about kind of the results of predictive app marketing so far and some of the exciting things that we've seen there. So just to kind of sum things up, we are app first. And the reason why we're app first and mobile first is because of what we sort of see in the data. So this is a chart. I don't know if any of you guys have seen this already, but this is from ComScore. It basically just shows the huge and widening gap, especially particularly between 2013 and 2014, of mobile and mobile apps overtaking desktop, just in terms of time spent. So this is very compelling data for us and promising for us because we are invested in helping companies, startups, really figure out how to best engage people on mobile and mobile apps, which is where people are increasingly spending most of their time. And we really don't see the trends or the data here narrowing. So we sort of see that gap that you see between the blue line desktop and mobile apps continuing to widen. And so it kind of just gives us further conviction that what we're doing and what we're building is the right thing. The next thing that's interesting is the actual time that's spent on apps versus mobile web. So we actually get a lot of questions about, should I be building a native app or should I be building native mobile or mobile website? And this is actually an interesting question, but we actually see, just in terms of time spent, that people on average are spending, in the US at least, a mobile consumer spending about 60 minutes with apps versus just 22 minutes on mobile web. So we really, again, believe that what we're building for the app first, mobile first world is the right thing to do. And this was actually something, I don't know if you guys recall the HTML5 kind of debate at Facebook a couple years ago when Facebook was basically deciding on mobile what they were going to do. Are they going to build native or are they going to bet on something else? And that was when they bet on HTML5, which if you hear Mark Zuckerberg talk about it today, he often says that that's one of the biggest mistakes that he's made. So not to say that mobile websites are not important, because they definitely are, but we are focused on kind of where the growth is, which is where people are spending most of their time in an app. So this is presents a huge opportunity, basically. So we believe that all this data just further presents a huge opportunity for mobile engagement. And it also kind of presents a lot of challenges. So 48,000 apps are basically downloaded from the App Store every 60 seconds, which is awesome. That's good news. It means that people are extremely active in the app world and that they're exploring new things and downloading applications. However, the challenge there is that they're downloading a ton of apps every minute, and that results in a lot of consumer, I would say, decision making, and they're not going to be able to spend all of their, let's say on average, 60 minutes in an app in your app. So what are we going to do about this, and what are some ways that you can address this? And those are things that we'll talk about in today's presentation. The other interesting thing is that 41 apps are installed on the average US smartphone. So this is data that we found from Nielsen, and this is also good news because, again, it means that users and consumers are downloading and using apps. The challenge here, again, is that there's 41 apps on someone's phone. So how are you going to be one of those apps that the user actually decides to keep? And an interesting stat that we found based on our data, so at Localytics, we obviously work with a lot of different organizations and companies, 37,000 apps roughly around there, and we analyze about 120 billion data points a month. So looking at our data, we also come up with some interesting insights, and we found that 25% of users actually only open an app once. So being one of the users' 41 apps installed on their phone continually, that is a challenge, and we recognize that. And again, we'll go over some best practices today. The interesting thing here, though, is that we also found in the data that when someone downloads your app for the very first time, on average, they're actually spending 10 minutes with the app. So the very first time someone downloads the app and opens it, they're actually spending 10 minutes. And that's a pretty significant amount of time to be able to get the onboarding experience right so that a user immediately understands the value that the app is going to provide them. And those are things that we strongly believe in and that we believe is really going to help you kind of combat this challenge of getting a user to stick with your app after they download it. The reasons why people uninstall mobile apps, as you can see, they range across a variety of different reasons, from privacy concerns to UI reasons, to the top two here being complex registration and annoying notifications. We'll talk a little bit more about push notifications later in the presentation as well, because those actually can be very advantageous for you if you do them right. And there's a lot of reasons why people don't keep mobile apps on their phone, but a lot of these reasons are actually within your control in terms of experience. So especially the top two reasons why people uninstall: a complex registration and annoying notifications. Those are things that are completely within your control if you have the right data behind your app to actually understand optimal flow and how you can sort of optimize that app experience. And that's something that a software like Localytics or another software you might be considering, but Localytics in particular is focused on helping you guys address, which is giving you the analytics and the marketing tools in one place so that you can actually communicate with people in a more engaging, relevant way so that they don't find your notifications to be annoying, and that you're also optimizing that registration flow so that users give you the information that they need or that you need and stick with your app. So those are kind of things, those are sort of the problems and the opportunities. So the next thing I want to move into today is personalizing the app lifecycle, so how we sort of see the world today. But before I move on, are there any questions, or Connor, are there any high-level questions that I can address?
I think we're okay right now, Yvonne. So maybe we'll just carry on and then maybe save questions for the end, I think. But if people, okay, I'll just plug it again. If anyone does have questions throughout, feel free to drop them into the Q&A app of Google Hangouts. You should see a blue square with Q&A on it. Just for you to enter your question in that way. You don't have to raise your hand. No one can interrupt you. It's perfect.
Thanks, Connor. Great. So personalizing the app lifecycle. So at Localytics, we talk about and we think about things in terms of an app lifecycle. And this is something that many of you have probably seen before. It's likely how you think about your business, your startup. And it's basically broken out into four stages, which is an acquisition piece, engagement and growth, and then lastly retention. So focusing on how you can actually keep users in that lifecycle loop of engagement and growth. And there's a lot of different tools that we offer today. Some of them are listed here on the slide. I'm not going to go through all of them, but these are basically the key areas of an app that we focus on, and that we focus on developing products and features that will enable you to actually effectively do all of these things, no matter what you're focused on in the life cycle. So if you're more focused on churn at the moment, we have tools that allow you to kind of focus on that. If you're focused on user acquisition right now as you're growing your app, those are also things that we will help you do. So on the acquisition piece, or the acquire phase of the app lifecycle, there are a couple things that we sort of want to highlight here. And when it comes to acquisition, there's a lot of different organic and paid things that you can do. So touching on them all briefly, the first thing is App Store optimization, which many of you are likely familiar with. And Localytics is not an App Store optimization company, but we do recognize that it is important. We partner with companies that do this, focus specifically on optimizing the app stores and downloads. And the main thing that I want to note here is just that it's just important to focus on App Store optimization at the end of the day. And it's something that a lot of companies and apps that we see in the market actually do wrong. Runkeeper is a customer of Localytics, and they've actually done, we feel, a pretty good job of optimizing their app store. So as you can see, they have their brand logo there, prominent front and center, so that when a user is downloading the app or searching for it, they can recognize it via that logo. The categories that Runkeeper has chosen to associate with its brand, run tracking, cycling, things that a user would actually search for in the App Store, that's how Runkeeper has been able to also help define and surface its app when a user is searching for related things. And the other thing that Runkeeper has done really well here is that they've actually included relevant and high-level screenshots of what the app actually does, so that when a user actually comes to the App Store with the intent of learning or downloading the app that you do have, they want to know that they're downloading the right app. And there's a lot of different apps out there. You know, again, 48,000 apps downloaded from the App Store every minute, which is pretty crazy. And a lot of apps have similar names. So just making sure that you get your app correct from a name to a branding perspective to screenshots is a really, really easy and effective way of optimizing App Store listings. The last piece of App Stores is the rating, and a lot of people focus on ratings, and it is important to focus on ratings as well. Something that we've actually found work really well with getting your ratings up is by targeting your most loyal app users with push notifications or in-app messages while they're using the app to ask them to actually rate your app a little bit. You want to give it a good amount of time after they've actually downloaded the app. If you ask them to rate your app right after they download it the first or second time, they probably likely haven't gotten the actual value from your app yet. But if you ask them maybe a month out or after their, let's say, like fifth session opening your app, then much better chances of getting a pretty positive rating. So those are things that we found to work well. The other things that we want to touch on are just some organic channels for acquisition. So one thing that we find is that companies that are able to identify where a user's coming from on mobile. So if users browsing to, let's say, yahoo.com on mobile, Yahoo actually shows them an interstitial screen that asks them to install the mobile app to get a better experience. And the reason why Yahoo does this is because they have invested time and money into building a good app, a more interactive app than what they're able to deliver on mobile web. So therefore, to deliver a better experience, you know, they're asking the user to actually install the app. So that's another good way, organic way of actually getting people to install your app on their phone. Another thing that we've seen work really well is through email. So this is an example actually from CVS. CVS is one of our customers as well. And what CVS is doing here is they're actually encouraging their email subscribers to download their app. And they're sending their loyal customers basically information about their deals and rewards and saying like, hey, to check out your deals and rewards, why don't you get our free app? You can download it from the App Store or the Google Play Store. The reason why this is interesting is because a company called Litmus, which actually analyzes a bunch of different email open rates, has found that 53% of emails are actually opened on a mobile device, which is pretty significant because I think just 3 years ago that number was only about 8%. So again, we're just seeing a lot of activity on mobile. I mean, when I think about my own activities or maybe other people's activities, you know, you're always on your mobile phone when you're in transit. When I commute to work in the morning, I'm always looking and checking my emails on my phone. So a lot of emails are open on a mobile device. It's another really good opportunity for you to be able to use that email list that you might have or you are acquiring right now and encouraging your email subscribers to also download the app to kind of be able to view things that are important to them. I think this is like the last organic channel I will touch on today, which is just social media. So social media is not something to ignore. We found that social media is a really good way to actually promote your app. So BuzzFeed in this example is tweeting you know, about interesting and important stories and how their followers can download the BuzzFeed News app on iOS to get even more interesting and news up front and center. So BuzzFeed does a really good job of this. Whether you're using, a Facebook page or your Twitter handle, those are all good opportunities for you to continue to direct people to your app if your app is really going to be that central place for you to direct people and engage with people. And lastly, so we went through some organic channels. For paid channels, this might be something that some of you are ready for, some of you might not be ready for yet. One way or another, a lot of people obviously spend money on mobile ads. Our main recommendation here with mobile ads, if you are going to do paid acquisition, is essentially just to work or partner with a mobile ad company to make sure that you are placing ads in other apps and that you're partnering with a company that actually has partnerships with mobile ad networks and tracking partners. And the reason why we talk about this is because at Localytics, we have an acquisition product that we find to be extremely useful for a lot of our customers, which is our attribution product. And so whether or not you use Localytics, an attribution product is really, really important because it's the best way for you to actually be able to attribute loyal users to your ad spend. So it will tell you, out of the different ad tracking partners or ad networks that you might be running ads with for acquisition, which one is actually giving you the biggest bang for your buck? Which one are you acquiring your most loyal users from? And this is actually a screenshot from Localytics, the Localytics dashboard. Localytics is a certified Facebook marketing partner, Twitter mobile measurement partner. We partner with essentially all the major ad networks out there, including, Kochava, Millennial, Tune, but basically, being able to attribute spend and then optimize your spend to different channels is one of the most important things that you can do if you are going to pursue a paid acquisition strategy. On to outside of acquisition, that loyalty loop that we talk a lot about at Localytics is the engagement and growth stages of the life cycle. So what does that actually mean? At Localytics, we talk about maximizing user value through engagement. And there are two key ways that we find to be effective when you're trying to maximize engagement. And number one, that's segmentation. And number two, it's channels, using different channels to the customer at different times. When we talk about segmentation, so segmenting is basically just targeting. A lot of people today on mobile are pretty basic in their messaging and marketing efforts, which is why I wanted to talk to you guys today a little bit more about marketing, which is that we actually find significant success and results with segmentation. So here's just a basic example, like let's say you're a sports apparel app. These are all baseball teams in California that I've put on here. But if you're a sports apparel app, a very, very simple way of segmenting your audience is to do it by team. So favorite team of the user, so that when you send them a message about a game that's coming up or scoreboard or whatever it might be, they're actually getting the relevant content for the team that they've actually designated as being their favorite team. And the reason why we find segmentation to be so important is because there are huge differences in push open rates and conversion rates when you send a broadcast message on mobile versus a targeted message. And so there are a lot of broadcast messages that actually do make sense. Maybe after someone, if you're an e-commerce app, maybe after someone checks out and purchases an item, you're always going to send a push notification that says like, hey, thanks for your order, here's free shipping on your next order. But we found in general that if you do all broadcast, only 3% of broadcast push messages are actually clicked on, versus when you do a targeted push message, again, maybe something as simple as targeting based on a user's favorite team, favorite kind of article, whatever it might be, you can actually more than double the open rates. So 7% of targeted push messages are actually clicked on. And then when you look at the conversion numbers here, 15% of users actually convert on broadcast push versus 54%, over 50% basically of users with a targeted push. So really, really interesting data that we found. And if we make it a little bit more real for you, let's just say you're an app and you have 100,000 users. And when you think about segmenting your audience and the numbers that you're actually able to affect using a targeted message versus a broadcast message, 3,000 open messages versus 7,000. Or do you want, potentially 450 converted users on a broadcast message versus close to 4,000 converted users? So just by simple segmentation, you can actually achieve a lot of impact, additional impact. And with segmentation, I think, you can get really complicated with segmentation really fast. There's a lot of different segments that you can create. You can create hundreds, you can create thousands of different segments. But our main, pointer here is basically just to start simple and start segmenting from the very beginning and do something basic in the beginning and see what's working and see what's not, and then you can kind of tailor your strategy from there. But biggest takeaway here is to segment. When it comes to segmentation, so the reason why we actually find segmentation to be really useful, this kind of harps on push notifications. So push notifications, I think, can often be seen as very negative. It's like the #1 reasons why people uninstall apps, but it's usually because people don't do push correctly. So we actually have found that users with push enabled on their phone open an app 88% more. So using push notifications the right way can actually help you in terms of helping users launch your app more often and have users have more meaningful sessions with your startup. So push notifications are also a really good way for you to reach people outside of the app environment. So if you want to get them to come back into the app environment, it's a really good way to get them to motivate like your inactive users to return to your app and give them some targeted relevant copy. So the example here is Free People. Free People is also a Localytics customer. Free People has actually done a very good job of their push message here. So they're sending this message to their users, inactive users, and using a software like Localytics, you can actually say, I want to send this message to people who have not logged into the app in the last, let's say, like 15 to 20 days. And so Free People here are sending a message to their inactive users, people who haven't really logged in recently. And they're saying, hey, welcome to Free People. Click here to enjoy free shipping on your first app purchase. It's valid for 2 weeks. And so an interesting thing that they've done here is that to their new users that maybe opened the app one time but like haven't logged in the last couple of days, they're saying like, hey, welcome again. Here's free shipping, and you can use it anytime in the next 2 weeks. So they're not forcing the user to do something right away. They're not making the user feel too pressured or that the company just wants to get money from them as soon as possible. They're actually giving them a decent window of time to actually go back into the app, search around, shop around, and maybe purchase something. So that's what we sort of see as a good example of push messaging. The common misconception is that most users don't have push enabled on their phone, which is actually not entirely true. So over 52% of users actually enable push on their phones. The downside of that is that 48% of users don't have push enabled on their phone. So we'll talk about how you can kind of address this audience that doesn't enable push on their phones. But to talk a little bit more about the people who do enable push on their phone, there are good times and bad times to actually ask your users to enable push. And you don't always have to do it the very first time someone downloads your app. So an example here, this is actually a bad example that we've pulled up of something that you don't want to do. So this app we've graded out here, it's Walmart. So this is what Walmart does when you first download their app and you open it for the first time. They give you a pop-up that says, Walmart would like to send you notifications. This is a really, really poor user experience, and it's a really, really good way of ensuring that users don't opt into your push notifications. So simple thing to do here is our number one recommendation: don't ask your users to opt in to push messages immediately after they launch your app for the very first time. The reason for that is because they, number one, don't quite know what type of experience your app is going to deliver yet. And because of that, they're not going to be able to understand the value. So why would they opt into any push notifications from your brand or your startup if they don't even know what they're going to get yet in terms of an experience? So not a good way to get someone to opt in to push notifications. A better way of actually getting users to opt in is through a sequence of introductory screens, or basically making it part of your registration process. So this is actually an example that we have from Retail Me Not. The first time someone opens the Retail Me Not app, they get this screen, which is like, hey, you know what, to start using our app, why don't you first tell us what you like? Choose your favorite store so we can actually show you the most relevant coupons that are going to matter to you. And so the user clicks on choosing their favorite store, and then they get this page, which is, heart the favorite stores that you want to be able to get coupons from. So the user goes through that, continues, and then they sort of deliver this very subtle way of asking a user to opt into their push notifications, which is, do you want us to notify you anytime your favorite stores have a coupon? And when the user says yes, that's great. And the user is much more likely to opt in and say yes here than say no thanks, because Retail Me Not has done a good job of flowing the user through, making the user understand that they're providing a relevant experience in the app, and then saying like, hey, we want to send you relevant coupons as you have told us that you want to get as soon as they come. So this is a really good way of getting users to opt into push. The other type of messaging that we have, so we covered a little bit basics of push messaging. There's in-app messages as well. So in-app messages are messages that are sent to the user while they're actually in your app. And we actually find that in-app messages are extremely effective to actually drive conversion. So if you're trying to get someone to buy something, if you're trying to get someone to subscribe, whatever that conversion event might be for you, in-app messages are actually a very effective way of doing that. So we found that in-app messages, when you trigger a message based off of an event that someone does in your app, so let's say someone opened an article to read or added an item to their cart, or listened to a song or something like that, those are events. And when you trigger a message, a relevant message off of one of those events, we've seen actually a 4x higher conversion rate. So in-app messages, when you do them well and you do them right and you give them, the necessary attention to make the creative a little bit more interesting, like you see here in the example, there's actually significant results. We've actually also found benefits in the number of app launches. So when you do use in-app messages, we've actually found that there's close to 30% more app launches on average for your app. So that means that people are actually engaging with your app more often, they're opening it more often, and they're increasing the number of sessions that they actually have with you. The last piece, which I want to sort of talk about in this engagement section and growth section, is around remarketing. So as you know, there were two pieces of that donut pie that I showed earlier. 52% of users opt in to push, 48% don't. So a really good way of actually reaching the 48% of users who opt out of push notifications is using a tool such as remarketing. And this is something that Localytics does have. We have a direct partnership with Facebook, so we actually offer Facebook remarketing, where you can actually show users ads based on how they've previously engaged with your business in the Facebook newsfeed. And this is a really good way of acquiring people who, for whatever reason, might have uninstalled your app. Maybe they haven't logged in the last 60 days. So you really want to get them and remarket to them and get them to re-download your app and hopefully provide them with a more engaging experience the second time around so that they actually stick with your app and become a loyal user. So remarketing can be a very, very effective tool for doing this. So that's kind of how we sort of see the app lifecycle, some very basic do's and don'ts of app marketing. The third piece that I want to talk about is predictive app marketing. So this is something that we at Localytics have been developing over the last couple of months. It's something that is extremely compelling and interesting for us because it's a more automated and smarter way of detecting users before they actually leave your app. And this particularly addresses that retention phase of the life cycle. So the whole reason why we developed this idea of predictive app marketing was because of the problem that we sort of saw in the data world, which was that over the last couple of years, everyone has talked about big data and how big data is this huge thing and how it's going to deliver all this awesome stuff in terms of machine learning and predictions and all these crazy formulas. And so a bunch of data scientists came into the picture and they developed a lot of fancy algorithms. But a lot of times those algorithms were not actionable. So they weren't updated frequently enough. It was very manual, and an everyday marketer or business person basically wasn't able to take action on it. So what we sort of see is that we're in a unique position now. Number one, because of what I talked about earlier in the presentation, which is that, you know, we are in a massive app explosion world where people are spending more time on apps. We really believe that apps create this predictive app marketing opportunity that wasn't there before. Number one reason is because users want better experiences. The number two part of this is that we see a lot of advances in computing, big data, machine learning. Those things have actually improved a lot over the last couple of years. And a way that we find that you can actually make the data actionable is through an app. So we find that apps are generating massive amounts of data, and the unique thing about an app is that the marketing channels, so you know, your push messaging, your in-app messaging, those are all channels that are actually directly embedded into the app and the mobile experience itself. So it's a very unique channel where everything's kind of happening in one place, and we really see an opportunity to develop a product or a feature that's going to take advantage of that and the advances that have happened to really deliver a smarter experience. So predictive app marketing, we position it as, you know, see it as basically bringing data science to marketing. And there's basically like three things that we see that enable this to work. And I'm going to walk you through actually an example that we have. We worked with a customer. One Football is actually the name of the customer. They're a big sports app in EMEA, and the first thing that they did was they worked with us to define their objective. So what they were trying to achieve, they wanted to reduce churn. The next thing that we worked on them with is making sure that we established this baseline and that we were able to understand how their users felt based on how they defined churn. And I'm going to make this a little bit more real in the next slide so you can actually see what I'm talking about. And then the third piece of that was using that information, we were able to work with OneFootball to actually help them take action through the app, through push messaging, in-app messaging, to engage with users before they actually left the app. So the example here is, number one, how they define churn. So many businesses, startups, today define churn as people who haven't logged in the last 30 days. And that might be how you define churn, but people define churn a little bit differently every now and then. OneFootball actually defines churn as, or in this case, they defined churn as users who visited their app at least 2 times in the past, but they hadn't logged in the last 30 days. So to them, that was their definition of what a churned user was. The next thing that we did is, based on their definition of churn, we were actually able to analyze and look at their data from the last couple of months and use our predictive algorithms that our data science team has actually developed to update on a daily basis. And we bucketed all their users into 3 different buckets. So people who are highly likely to churn, a medium likelihood of churning, and then a low likelihood of churn. And these were basically some auto segments that we developed for them based on what they told us churn meant for their app. The last thing that we did is we enabled them to use Localytics as well to act on this data. So sending personalized push messages to actually drive users back into the app before they deleted the app from their phone. So this was preemptive information that we were giving to OneFootball so that they could identify people highly likely to churn and then send them a message to say, like, hey, here's a special offer, or here's your favorite team score, whatever it might be, and they sent personalized messages to those users to actually drive them back into the app. An example of how this kind of works in our UI, this is not exactly what it looks like, but we want to make sure that we give our companies that we work with the right tools to actually use the predictive information and take action on it. So here, we allow you to combine behavioral attributes with profile attributes. So we say, okay, you want to target people who opened a push message at least 1 time, and you want to combine that with people who have a predicted high churn risk. And then, you compose the content of the message. This is just an example from Runkeeper. But we enable you to basically compose the message and then send it out. This is the examples actually from OneFootball in their tests with us. So they were actually able to, we did a control group and experimental group, and we actually found that we were able to improve retention by about 6.6% and rescue close to 5,000 users for them. So really, really interesting data. And when we look at kind of churn risk, we also are able to predict conversion likelihood. So depending on your objectives, if your objective is to reduce churn or to drive conversion, you can define that objective, and then we will basically auto-segment users into those different buckets. So again, we'll tell you high, medium, low, number of users, and the percentage of active users that are actually represented in those buckets. The other thing that we are pretty passionate about is not just helping you understand who falls in what buckets, but why they actually fall in those buckets. And so we'll give a lot of companies that use this product information about the top related behaviors to churn or conversion. And so, for example, if you look at some of these examples, like let's say you're a restaurant app, and you find that users who perform 0 to 2, restaurant tapped events, like they tap on a restaurant, in their first 7 days of using the app are actually 20% more likely to churn. So you want to try and get people to actually tap on a restaurant in their first 7 days at least 3 times. So those are some of the insights that you can get. Same thing goes for like this app launch example. So maybe you find that users who launch the app 0 to 4 times in their first 30 days are 20% more likely to churn. So then that kind of indicates to you, in terms of behavior that you want to go after in your app, you actually want to try to get people to open your app at least 5 times within their first month of using the app. And that's what's actually going to generate more loyalty and get the user to actually stick with your app more. And so one way we actually also think about this is what Facebook did in the early days with friends, where they found that the sweet number for number of friends that actually indicated whether a user was going to stick with Facebook or leave Facebook was 7 friends. So we're trying to do something similar here with churn or conversion to kind of give you those leading indicators so that you can actually focus on them and get your users to exhibit specific behaviors that are more likely to get them to stick around. In terms of some other results, so we actually worked with a number of different apps on the same, predictive app marketing test, and we found that this is actually an example from a lifestyle app that we worked with, where we were able to help them improve churn by 14% and rescue for them close to 40,000 users. So a lot of opportunity here. So lastly, just sort of want to conclude. With the presentation that we, number one, believe that apps are the future. Our CEO, Raj, often talks about the appification of the web, and we see that with people spending more time there and usage overall, just an engagement happening deeper, at a deeper level in an app. The next thing that is a takeaway is just we strongly urge you to think of your app strategy in terms of a life cycle. So making sure that you are using a tool that enables you to address all those key stages of the life cycle from acquisition to retention so that you can get users engaged on a regular basis and convert more new time users into some of your most loyal customers. And then the last piece is the predictive piece, which is we really believe that apps are bringing data and action together in a singular way that actually enables these predictive marketing capabilities to come to life. So without further ado, that's pretty much it. I wanted to quickly cover the perk with you guys just so you knew what we were offering as part of working with you, which is what you see here. So, our current free product is actually only up to 10,000 MAUs. We're offering free to use our product up to 25,000 MAUs. Our free product does include analytics, attribution, which I mentioned earlier, push and in-app messaging. We also have remarketing and email marketing. Remarketing, email, and raw data are actually available at an additional cost. So if those are things that you are interested in or that you do want, there is an extra fee for those. After you hit the 25K MAU mark, we do give you a 20% discount on any contract that you want to sign. You get access to our Localytics Quick Start program, which Annalisa is a part of, and we also will give you some consulting help from our onboarding team as well. So if you are interested in the perk, you can email startups@localytics.com. If you have any questions about any of the product stuff, feel free to email me, Yvonne. It's ychen@localytics.com.
Perfect. Well, thanks so much, Yvonne. Really appreciate that. And I think for everyone who's watching, certainly I recommend that you take advantage of that Localytics perk that we have in place. It's a great deal. So we have some time for questions, if that's cool with you, Yvonne and Annalisa. For folks, just if you haven't had a chance to submit your question yet, just remember, go up to the little box beside your profile picture, hit that, and then the Q&A box will pop down there. I know I've been hammering it at home, but just take a second there if you haven't asked a question and would like to. That's how you do it. But just first, we have a couple questions in, one of which is just if you could talk a little bit more, Annalisa and Yvonne, maybe about location services and the role that location-based targeting might have in app marketing. Is there a role there? What does that look like moving forward? I think we're probably going to see more and more of that.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. We get that question a lot, and Annalisa, feel free to chime in if you have anything else to add. I would say location services are something that Localytics is looking into, and we're looking at a product that we're aiming to launch likely in Q1 of next year. In terms of what we offer right now for location, we really offer just like basic location targeting, which is like you can target what country a user is in. But location is important. A lot of people talk about this amazing, seamless location experience where you target a user on mobile like as soon as they walk into your store, and it's like this seamless offer experience, and it drives all this conversion. But a lot of companies actually aren't quite there yet. So like CVS and Localytics work really closely together. CVS talks about this a lot. They have a ton of brick and mortar stores, obviously. They have a mobile experience. They want to be able to offer that seamless experience. But at the same time, when you are trying to do all this cool location stuff, you have to have the infrastructure to do it, right? So that requires like iBeacons. It requires like all these different like store strategies, training of your store like management teams, like stuff like that. But definitely like location from a pure, if you have just one channel and you don't have hundreds of different brick and mortar retail stores, location is really important, I think, for targeting, and we do offer some basic location targeting, but we are looking to offer a little bit more over the coming months.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that answers your question, but
do you have anything to say about that, Annalisa? Or other trends you've noticed maybe?
Yeah, Yvonne covered it for the most part. We do automatically track the last country in the last city that you were seeing. I believe the city works particularly for the U.S. And some of the other larger metro areas. So, and a lot of times, like, that level of segmentation is just what our users are looking for. But yeah, we have some cool stuff coming down the pipeline.
Cool.
Yeah, we also do have the profiles product. So our profiles product basically enable you as a startup, if you have data that you've collected about your users on, when they last bought something or what city they last bought something, you can actually import that data into Localytics through our profiles API, and then you can use that information to target the user based off of. So there are other like things that you can do currently as well.
Right. Cool. And we have another question here from someone who's curious about like getting your app rated. I think you had talked earlier in the program about that.
Yes.
The question is, like, is NPS the best way to approach this, or are there other questions to get the best rating, to select the best data and the best rating from teams, from users?
Yeah, so we find a strategy that a lot of apps actually use is kind of what I was mentioning a little bit earlier, is that they, in the beginning at least, they only ask their most loyal users to actually rate the app. Right. And the first thing you want to do is you want to actually focus on the app experience. So what is the best user onboarding experience you could provide? What are the most engaging messages that you could send that wouldn't be annoying? And focus on that initial, like, let's say like 2-week run experience. And then like you could say, okay, I want to send a message to users who've logged into my app at least 4 or 5 times in the last 2 weeks. And that would indicate to you like, hey, this is a pretty engaged user. They're logging in pretty regularly. It's only been 2 weeks. Let me ask them to rate the app. Or maybe if you're an e-commerce app, you ask someone to rate your app after they've made a purchase, because it means that they liked an item that they saw, they were able to check out with an item, and so they likely, hopefully, had at least a positive experience with your business, and then that might be a good opportunity for you to ask them to rate the app. So I think it's really all about timing, thinking about the experience for new users, and then timing when you actually ask them to rate your app. Don't ask just anyone to rate it in the beginning, because a couple negative reviews in the very beginning when you're getting started is really going to hurt you.
Mm-hmm. Cool. I think we have another question here, about mobile payments. So we've seen the rise of mobile payments in the West with Apple Pay and things like it. I think China too would have WeChat, would have a huge payment gateway for people. Where do you see that going in terms of, what do you think will happen there? What do you think will happen with mobile payments, especially maybe with in-app marketing? What's the relationship look like there? Is it as simple as putting a buy button in your app, or maybe what's the best experience there?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think like commerce and payments is just starting to take off. There's so many companies like Stripe, there's Braintree, and these companies are all trying to enable all these different back-end payment systems to really make payment on mobile happen much more seamlessly, because it can be pretty bulky, a pretty bulky experience right now. I don't know if it's as simple as just slapping on a buy button, but it's definitely something that Localytics, we believe is important, and it's something that we want to be able to offer at least tools to help you optimize. So we're not a company that's going to help you enable payments on your phone. We're not going to give you a buy button to add, but we're going to give you at least the data so that you can say okay, the buy button that I put on the bottom right-hand corner versus the buy button that I put on the top left-hand corner, the bottom right-hand one performed better because of these reasons and on these days and with these kinds of users. And so maybe that's something that I want to optimize the app experience for these guys versus the other cohort. So that's kind of the insight that we would enable, I would say, from a payments perspective, so that you know when is the right time to actually deliver that experience. Or we would give you the ability to basically link a user to the buying page, right? So if the user viewed an item one day and then the next day you wanted to come back and buy it, you could say hey, check out this item, free shipping, click here, and then you take them directly to the buy button experience for that item. So those are some interesting things I think you can do.
Cool. I think always the question here from someone who's done Hacks, which is our hardware program. I think it's sort of related to the location question. But what role do you think the Internet of Things, IoT, has to play in mobile marketing? I imagine we're seeing more and more products, consumer products, that can interact both with mobile, but certainly are just hooked up to the web. What are ways? Maybe what are some trends you see on the horizon in that space?
It's interesting. Trends I see on mobile marketing, Internet of Things. I mean, I don't know if it addresses Internet of Things directly, but we see a lot of mobile marketing automation, and predictive stuff is definitely a part of this trend. So our ultimate goal, and everyone's ultimate goal, is to get to a point where we can tell you ahead of time, hey, these are the users in your app, this is what they likely are going to do in the next 7 to 10 days, and we give you these magic automated tools that send these messages at the right time at the right place. And that's, I think, the holy grail of where we would want to eventually be able to get with our predictive tool, is not just segment users for you and give you the ability to send messages, but instead automate everything across the life cycle into this evergreen journey, where if a user is visiting you on mobile, but you also have a website, you're able to marry that data and information to say hey, this user looked at us on their website, then on their iPad, and then they came to us on their mobile device, and so now we're going to deliver them this more relevant experience. So I think there's a lot of work to be done in mobile. It's still a pretty new space, and I think we're really only seeing the very tip of the iceberg, I guess you could say, in terms of what's possible. So, but we are, at least as a company, we're banking a lot on marketing automation, mobile evergreen journeys, and making predictive capabilities more real for everybody to use. Yeah.
Cool. All right.
I'll also add to that a little bit. I think the engagement piece depends a little bit on the device that you're talking about and the product that you're selling. So, I was recently on site with a customer where they're a company somewhat like Nest, where they have connected devices in your home. They don't need to send a push message every day letting them know what the temperature is inside their house, right? So for them, it's making sure that the transactional push API is working for them, so that if your thermostat is broken or your house gets way too hot or way too cold, you get an alert about that. But that on a day-to-day basis, you're not going to be sending push messages, but you might be using in-app a lot more to improve the user experience inside the app, or possibly using email or other channels to engage users in a different avenue. But I think it's about just finding the right channel that makes sense for your app and for your business.
Yep. Totally.
Cool. All right. I have one question before I let you guys go. which is just about, it's sort of my go-to question always, which are what are the top 3 mistakes? It could be 3, it could be 5, so we're going to be a lot. What are the kind of the top mistakes that you see startups make when it comes to mobile analytics and in-app marketing?
Yeah, I'm sure Annalisa has a lot of things to say since she works with so many startups. I would say number 1 is just the misconception that marketing is not necessary in the very beginning, and I recognize that as a common challenge, because as a startup, it's you're just trying to pull together whatever as much as you can as quickly as you can so that you get your product launched and out the door and you can start testing and getting users. But the engagement piece is actually really important, and if you do it well with just some basic things like what we talked about, like segmentation or using push messaging the right way, that's a really good way for you to actually retain the users that you spent money acquiring, if you did spend money acquiring a user, because at the end of the day, it's a lot cheaper to keep a user than to acquire a new one. So if you don't have any of the engagement tools that you're using in your app, especially with all the stats we covered, all these apps on someone's phone, 25% of apps are only used once, how else are you going to get the user to engage with you on mobile if you're not kind of reminding them or you're not delivering that optimal experience? So I would say don't ignore mobile marketing. I think it is important. Let's see, another mistake. Analytics, I guess, can sometimes be overlooked by startups too, just again because you're focused on getting your app out the door. But again, if you don't have any of the data behind what's working and what's not, how are you going to know what to optimize? And we've worked with a lot of startups to kind of help them better understand flows or different funnels or different demographics of users that they should be targeting, or where they should be spending their money, if they're spending money on Facebook or they're spending money acquiring people on Twitter, whatever it might be. So analytics can also be overlooked because it's more work. And it requires you to install SDK stuff and tag events, and there's integration there, but it is really important to get right. Otherwise, you're not going to have any insight to actually make the right, pull the right levers. And then I would say the third piece is third mistake startups often make.
2 is okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I think those two.
I have a couple.
Those 2. Annalisa has more. Okay.
So I have 2 as well, so we'll give you 4. How about that? So I think the first one that actually is sort of assumed in everything that Yvonne has given in this presentation is making sure that your event tagging is set up correctly to begin with, right? So all of the engagement pieces are predicated upon the idea that you have tagged the right events and the events that matter to you within your app. So if you want to send a push message to users who have bought an item in your store, you have to make sure you've tagged that event so that when you get to that point, you've got the right events tagged. They're all named correctly so that you can understand them. Sometimes we'll see developers sort of go off on their own and tag 1,000 events with names like Z12, push 3. What does that event mean? Your marketer is not going to be able to come in there and choose the events appropriately. So I think making sure you leave enough time and enough sort of brain space to sit down with your team and figure out, what really matters to us. What are the business cases that we're trying to sort of track from the analytics side, and what are the campaigns that we're going to want to run a month from now, 6 months from now. When you run these kinds of campaigns, you can also set conversion events, so you can see, when you run this push campaign, did the users actually come back and log in? Did they do X? Did they do Y? And you can switch those conversion events around after you've sent the push campaign, sort of as long as you have those tagged from the very beginning. So that's sort of been assumed, but I think it's worthwhile to note, because when you're a startup, if you have a couple of folks on your team, maybe you have a CTO or maybe you have an outsourced dev team, just making sure that you can sit down with them and make sure the developers know exactly what they should be tagging and why, so that when they're going through our documentation, they don't skip steps and you don't get to a point where you want to send the push campaign and you don't have the right tools at hand to be able to do so. Then the second one I would just say that I see is that people just aren't running enough tests. When you're a startup, it's really important to run tests on pretty much everything all the time. So within Localytics, we have the ability to do A/B testing on things like email, push and in-app messaging. The other thing that I think is really important though is for you to do. It's not I think it's a good use of your money to run like AdWords campaigns or Facebook campaigns and just test different messaging and different branding to make sure that sort of you're moving in the right direction as far as product market fit. Just seeing like what your click rates are on different, copies or creatives on Google AdWords or Facebook can be really informative as far as helping figure out like what's resonating with your audience and what's not. Then you can bring that back into your, actually mobile experience.
Great. Well, that's perfect. Well, Yvonne Chen and Annalise Bowens, thank you both so much.